the air of the African savanna, about 170,000 years ago. You wake up, stretch, look around, and at no point do you think, you know what would really complete this morning? Pants. And yet, here we are, billions of people every morning putting on pants, skirts, or that one item that's technically pajamas but you've worn for 3 days and now call loungewear because it sounds intentional. Clothing is so ingrained in human existence that we literally arrest people for not wearing it. Think about that for a second. The state will intervene if you're too naked. We've built an entire legal system around the concept of, please put some clothes on. We have laws about nudity as a species. That's how far we've come. But why? When did it start? And, more importantly, why did we do it when virtually every other animal on the planet just didn't? Dogs don't wear clothes. Wolves don't wear clothes. The elephant, which is objectively smarter than most of the people you went to high school with, never thought, I need a coat for this. The short answer is, we don't exactly know when it happened. The long answer is far more interesting and a little bit weird, and it involves lice, which, spoiler, is not as gross as it sounds. Actually, it's exactly as gross as it sounds, but stick with it. Because the lice thing is genuinely one of the most bizarre and fascinating pieces of evolutionary detective work in all of science. Let's go back to the beginning. The naked ape problem. Here's something no one talks about enough. Humans are basically the only large mammals on Earth that are mostly hairless. Stop and think about that zoologically for a second. Gorillas, covered. Chimpanzees, covered. Bears, lions, wolves, horses, elephants, hippos, all of them, in vastly different environments and climates, walk around with full coats. And then there's us, in the middle of all that biodiversity, just smooth, a little patchy, oddly pink in places, sporting an evolutionary look that says, I used to have hair, but I made some choices. Scientists have a few theories about why we lost our hair in the first place. The most popular is the thermoregulation argument. Basically, as our ancestors moved from forests to open savannas and started running long distances to hunt, being covered in a thick fur coat became a huge disadvantage. You'd overheat, slow down, your core temperature would rise, and you'd collapse before you caught whatever you were chasing. And then you'd starve, which from an evolutionary perspective is the worst possible outcome. So, over hundreds of thousands of years, we gradually lost our hair and developed something better. An absolutely insane number of sweat glands. Humans have approximately 2 to 4 million sweat glands on their bodies. That's more than almost any other animal on the planet. We are, no exaggeration, elite sweating machines. Professional grade, world-class moisture emitters. If there were sweating Olympics, we'd dominate every category. This is great in the summer. It's considerably less great when it's 40 below zero and you're trying to survive in Central Asia with only your wits and a rock. And that's where clothes come in. Eventually, warmth probably wasn't the first reason. Probably, here's the conventional story. Humans left Africa, encountered colder climates, got cold, wrapped themselves in animal hides, and boom. Simple, clean, logical, a 5-year-old could figure it out. Except the timeline doesn't quite work. And once you realize that, the whole neat narrative starts to unravel. Genetic evidence suggests humans started wearing clothes between 100,000 and 170,000 years ago. The problem is, modern humans only started migrating out of Africa in significant numbers around 70,000 years ago. So, if clothes were purely a response to cold weather, why are they showing up tens of thousands of years before humans actually went anywhere cold? Something else must have been going on earlier. Something social, something that has more to do with who we are as a species than the temperature outside. But before we get into that, we need to talk about the most unlikely piece of evidence in the entire history of clothing origins. And yes, it's lice. Let's talk about lice now. The lice that changed everything. Researchers at the University of Florida were doing what geneticists do, which apparently involves staring at very small things for extremely long periods and occasionally having a breakthrough that changes everything. And they decided to map the evolutionary history of human lice. Now here's the crucial piece of biology you need to understand. Humans have two main types of lice: head lice and body lice. Head lice live in your hair. Body lice live specifically in clothing, in the seams, in the folds, in the fabric. They are two genetically distinct populations. And body lice evolved from head lice at some specific point in history. Here's why that matters enormously. Body lice can only survive if there are clothes to live in. They cannot survive on bare human skin. They need fabric. They need the warmth and shelter that clothing provides. So, the moment body lice genetically diverged from head lice, the moment that evolutionary split happened, is essentially the moment humans started wearing clothes consistently enough to create a new ecological niche for a parasite. When researchers crunched the numbers, they found that body lice diverged from head lice between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. Let that sink in for a moment. A parasitic insect, one of the most universally loathed creatures in human history, the thing that causes panic in elementary schools and ruined sleepaway camps, accidentally preserved the earliest evidence of human fashion. Lice knew we were getting dressed before we did. They were there. They adapted. They moved in. This is either beautiful or deeply, deeply horrifying. Possibly both simultaneously. Probably both. So, what were clothes for then? Okay, we've established that clothing predates out of Africa migration by a significant margin, which means warmth can't be the original motivator. So, what was the theory? Number one, basic physical protection. Not from cold, but from sun, insects, sharp vegetation, and general abrasion. If you spend your days walking through tall grass and thorny bushes, tracking animals across rocky terrain, a simple wrap or loincloth made of animal hide creates a significant barrier between your skin and things that want to scratch it, bite it, or burn it. It's not glamorous, it's not philosophically interesting, but it probably kept early humans significantly more comfortable and reduced infections from minor cuts and scrapes. Sometimes the boring answer is the correct one. Theory number two is where it gets genuinely interesting: social signaling. Humans are, at our core, deeply social animals. We are obsessed with hierarchy in a way that goes right down to the bone. We are constantly and compulsively communicating who we are, what group we belong to, what status we hold, whether you should be afraid of us, whether you should be attracted to us, or treat us with deference. We do this with our posture, our facial expressions, our voices, our hairstyles, our tattoos, and very likely, from a very early stage, with what we cover our bodies with. There's evidence that our ancestors used pigments like ochre for body decoration 200,000 years ago. That's earlier than the lice evidence for clothing. So, the impulse to decorate the body to visually signal something about oneself to the group may be older than clothing itself. We were painting ourselves before we were dressing ourselves. The leap from decorating your skin to wearing a particular type of skin in a particular way isn't a huge cognitive leap. And once skin is worn, you start thinking about which skin and how it's worn and what that communicates. Is it the skin of something powerful? Did I kill it myself? Does wearing it say something about me? Welcome to the first fashion industry. A small band of Homo sapiens on the African savanna arguing about who gets to wear the leopard print. Needles and the invention of tailoring. For most of early human history, clothes probably looked rough. A hide thrown over the shoulders, cinched with a thong made of twisted sinew, maybe crudely cut at the edges with a stone flake. Functional, clunky, the prehistoric equivalent of wearing a trash bag. It gets the job done, but no one's winning any awards. But then, about 50,000 years ago, something shifts in the archaeological record. Researchers have found bone needles, not just pointy tools for making holes, but actual needles with tiny eyelets, clearly designed to thread sinew or fiber through and stitch material together with precision. Fitted clothing, sewn seams, garments shaped to the body, rather than just draped over it. The oldest confirmed needle with a proper eyelet was found in Denisova cave in Siberia and dates to approximately 50,000 years ago. It was made from the hollow bone of a bird, shaped and polished with a delicacy that is genuinely extraordinary. This object represents a cognitive leap that is hard to overstate. Someone looked at a bone shard, envisioned a tool that didn't yet exist, figured out how to make a clean hole in the narrow end without cracking it, and used the finished product to join two pieces of material with a controlled, repeatable seam. This isn't survival instinct. This is engineering. This is design thinking. This is someone solving a problem through imagination and craftsmanship, rather than brute force. And that needle matters more than almost any other object from that period. Because you can live without pottery. You can live without cave paintings. In Siberia, 50,000 years ago, deep in an Ice Age winter, without well-fitted clothing that seals warmth against the body, you absolutely cannot. Neanderthals did it too. Here's something that's often left out of the clothing origin story, mostly because it complicates the narrative that modern humans invented everything. Neanderthals also made and wore clothes, and they were doing it well before we ever met them. We found substantial evidence of Neanderthals systematically processing animal hides, scraping bones in patterns consistent with hide preparation, using specific stone tools that were clearly designed for working leather, and managing carcasses in ways that suggest they were interested in the skin as much as the meat. There's also genetic and anatomical evidence suggesting Neanderthals had physiological adaptations to cold climates, stockier bodies, shorter limbs, different fat distribution, which tells us they were dealing with intense cold for a very long time. Clothes would have been essential, not optional. And then there are the Denisovans, the mysterious third human lineage we only discovered in 2010 from a single finger bone found in the same Siberian cave. In the same archaeological layers as the needle, researchers found perforated and polished ornaments that suggest symbolic thought, decoration, and possibly clothing embellishment. A people we barely know existed were already thinking about what they were wearing and how it looked. So, the impulse to clothe the body wasn't unique to our lineage. Multiple human species in different environments arrived at similar solutions through overlapping reasoning. Which raises a genuinely unsettling question. Is clothing a human thing, or is it a smart bipedal primate living in a hostile environment thing? Is it inevitable? Would any sufficiently intelligent, sufficiently cold, sufficiently social creature eventually figure out that wrapping yourself in something is just obviously correct? We don't know. But the cross-species convergence is very hard to ignore. Let's step back and talk about the truly weird thing here. The thing that separates human clothing from any other animal's relationship with shelter or protection. If clothes were purely practical, every culture throughout history would converge on the most thermally efficient solution for their climate and stay there forever. Thick furs in the Arctic, light plant fiber in the tropics, same shapes, same function, total standardization, done. That is categorically not what happened. What happened is that humans immediately and universally made clothes mean something. In every culture, we have records going back to the earliest archaeological evidence. Clothes carry a symbolic weight that goes far beyond their physical function. Priests wore different things than warriors. Rulers wore things no one else was allowed to wear. The dead were buried in specific garments suited to their status and the journey ahead. Ceremonies required specific attire that would be absurd in any other context. Some of the oldest textile fragments ever found weren't just plain pieces of cloth. They were dyed in multiple colors. Someone tens of thousands of years ago looked at a perfectly functional piece of woven material and thought, this needs to be a different color. Not because it would keep them warmer, but because it would mean something different. Because it would say something. That is the fundamental strangeness of human clothing. We use clothing as language. We use it to construct and convey identity. We use it to say, I belong to this group. I hold this rank. I am mourning. I am celebrating. I am dangerous. I am available. I am sacred. I am common. No other animal does this. Peacocks display, sure, cuttlefish change color, but they're not choosing what to communicate based on social context, cultural history, and personal narrative. That is entirely ours, and it started, as far as we can tell, in Africa, between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago, when some ancestor of ours picked up a piece of ochre, painted themselves with it, and felt something click about who they were in relation to everyone else. Even if warmth wasn't the original reason, it became a critical survival issue quickly. Between approximately 120,000 and 70,000 years ago, Earth went through a series of brutal glacial cycles. Global temperatures dropped dramatically. Ice sheets expanded dramatically. Large portions of Africa became hyper-arid. Lakes dried up. Food sources collapsed. The human population may have dropped to somewhere between 10,000 and 30,000 individuals at its lowest point. We almost went extinct. We came terrifyingly close to simply not existing anymore as a species before we'd even properly begun. For the survivors, and especially for the groups that eventually pushed north into Europe and east into Central Asia in the millennia that followed, clothes were no longer a social signal or a practical comfort. It was the thin line between life and death. Literally, groups that had already developed sophisticated clothing technology, fitted, layered, stitched, sealed at the edges, had a survival advantage so significant it's hard to overstate. A well-constructed garment traps warm air against the body. It protects the wrists and neck, the places where blood runs close to the surface and heat escapes fastest. It allows a human body to survive temperatures that would kill an unclothed person in hours. Those with the needle, the thread, the knowledge of how to prepare, hide, and layer materials, they survived. They had children. Those children learned the same skills. And those skills, passed down through generations, are part of the reason modern humans made it to every continent on Earth. We didn't just evolve bodies suited to the world. We built a second skin and took it everywhere we went. There's a transition in clothing history that's often overlooked because it doesn't have a single dramatic moment associated with it: the shift from animal hides to woven plant fibers. Animal hides are warm, durable, and water-resistant. They're also heavy, stiff, hard to clean, and you have to kill something to get them, which is a logistical constraint. At some point, humans started working with plant fibers, spinning them into thread, twisting them into cordage, eventually weaving them into fabric. The oldest known twisted plant fiber was found in a cave in the Republic of Georgia and dates to approximately 30,000 years ago. Crucially, these fibers were dyed in multiple colors, already decorative, already intentional, already communicating something beyond simple function. By the time of the Neolithic agricultural revolution, around 10,000 BC onwards, textile production had become a core technology of human civilization. Cultivation of flax for linen, wool from domesticated sheep, eventually cotton, silk, and the extraordinary variety of fibers that different cultures independently developed around the world. And with textiles came something genuinely revolutionary: the wardrobe. Clothes that could be specialized for different purposes. A heavy cloak for winter, a light wrap for summer, specific garments for rituals, for work, for status, for mourning. Clothing as a system of expression rather than a single object of survival. The textile industry, long before the Industrial Revolution made it mechanical, was one of the most significant economic and cultural forces in the ancient world. Entire trade routes were built on it. Empires were funded by it. Wars were fought over access to the raw materials for it. Silk alone reshaped the political geography of half the world. All of this from a cold, naked primate with clever hands and a piece of bone. So, why did ancient humans start wearing clothes? The honest answer is for all the reasons, in overlapping waves driven by biology, culture, climate, and social complexity, all at once. It probably started with practical protection, something between skin and thorns, sun and biting things. It evolved almost immediately into social signaling, a way to say something about who you are in a world full of other people making constant judgments about you. It became a survival technology when the climate turned hostile and migrations began. And it became an art form, an industry, a language, and an identity as human culture grew more complex. The remarkable thing isn't that we started wearing clothes. Given who we are, social, symbolic, status-obsessed, freezing half the time, it was probably inevitable. You're doing it now. Whatever you're wearing, you made choices, conscious and unconscious, about what to put on today. And those choices reflect something about who you are, how you feel, what group you belong to, what image of yourself you're presenting to the world. You're doing exactly what that person on the African savannah was doing, wrapped in ochre-stained hide, figuring out how to signal something about themselves to the people around the same campfire. 150,000 years of human history. And the thing that connects you to them directly, without interruption, is the simple fact that you got dressed this morning. That's not a